Hello and welcome to OrgTech. I am Ginger Jesus, and today we're going to be going through the campaign for Blood Bowl 3. Mostly we're going to go through the campaign because the campaign is a terrible way to learn the game. So, follow along, and maybe we can't make this just a little bit easier for you so you can get into this game slightly faster. Now, the game is simple. It's just a series of rules. Follow those rules, play the game. But much like chess, learning the rules will not teach you how to play chess. Blood Bowl is very much like that. So let's start at the beginning. We're going to look at movement. Of the 5 stats, movement is the one you're going to be paying attention to the most. As you can see, around the outside here of the character, you see the little dotted lines. That tells you your movement capability. You can move up to that far with a single character. You may move each character once per turn. Of the other stats available, you also have strength, passing, armor value, and memory is terrible. It'll come to us later. So we're going to look at how we hit in Blood Bowl. So right now, our strength is even. Strength 3 versus strength 3. Therefore, we roll 1 die and we keep the results. What we're looking at here is a POW reaction, otherwise known as a 6. The other dice are Defender Stumbles. You have 2 arrows representing the 3 and the 4. You also have a both down and a skull. We'll get into those shortly. However, with that POW, you do get to hit your opponent's piece and then choose to either follow up or stay put. We're going to follow up. That piece is now on the ground. You roll against their armor. That's what those 2 dice were. That 6 that came up, you're trying to get above your opponent's armor value. Most armor values are 9 or better. Now we're going to look at what happens when you are attacking an opponent's piece and your strength is higher than your opponent. Right now, the strength for this piece here is 3, and we are attempting to hit a halfling who is strength 2. And because we are hitting a strength 2 halfling, we are awarded more dice. The way this works is simple. You roll the dice, and then you get to pick which dice you wish to keep. We have an arrow, which is a push reaction, and a skull. Skulls are bad. There is no way a skull can be good, so the arrow is chosen. The halfling is moved, but not knocked down, because that is how the arrow functions. If your strength is more than your opponent by a factor of double or more than double, you may throw 3 dice, picking your favorite one. Here again we have the skull, we have the POW, which represents the 6, and the arrow, which represents the 3 and the 4. Skull represents a 1, by the way. And there we go. Halfling is knocked down, rolled a 5 against his armor, which is not enough to break his armor value of 7. It's a shame. All right. So this is the skull, and this is how the skull reacts. The skull is rolled. Only 1 dice was rolled. You must choose the skull. When you choose the skull, your opponent hits you instead, and it is the end of your turn. Also, an armor roll is made against yourself. Your opponents can hurt you if a skull is rolled. Let's go back to the movement. As I said before, when you move your character, his movement allowance appears on the screen. And that tells you how far he can go. As you can see, the dotted line ends 2 squares from the end zone, but there is an extra 2 squares past that with exclamation points. You may actually attempt to move through those squares past your maximum. There is a dice roll involved. The rule is don't roll a 1 for most situations. In this situation, it is also don't roll a 1. A 2 or better, and you are safe running through those areas. It can be dangerous. I recommend playing with it carefully and not doing it too often. And as you can see, the dice rolling above his head indicate that that was a success, and he is across the end zone. So let's look at a blitz. A blitz is what happens when you move and hit. You may do 1 per turn. Only 1, so please be careful. Also, if you tell the computer you're activating a blitz and then you don't hit somebody, you do lose your blitz for the turn, so please be careful with that. Now, a blitz maneuver after hitting does not mean your turn is over with that piece. That piece can still continue its movement. This piece has one movement left, so therefore it's going to be moved over here, and now its turn is done and the next piece is moved. We're going to look at assists. Earlier we discussed strength being even and strength being better, so right now the two characters standing off against each other are both strength even. So we move someone up to assist. He is standing next to the opponent's piece, while an opponent's piece is not standing next to him. Therefore, he offers you a +1 to your strength. So a single die now becomes a 2-die option for you. Here we have the skull, and we have the both down, which is the skull with the POW symbol next to it. Neither one of those is good. As we stated earlier, rolling a skull means that your opponent's piece gets to strike your piece, and there is an armor value. When you get a both down, you both go to the ground. And an armor value is made for both of you. Star player points can be awarded to either coach, depending on who gets damaged. However, there is mitigation for the block. If you get a both down, and one of the characters happens to have the block skill, that character does not go down. The other character does. So in this situation, the human has the block skill, while the chaos does not. Therefore, in this situation, the human will stay up, the chaos will go down, and an armor value roll will be made against him, which was a 10, which beat his armor. 6 did not hurt him. He is, however, stunned and cannot get up for the round. So take your hits. They're very useful. So here we're going to look at fouling. Fouling is another thing you can do once per turn. It can be dangerous. I don't recommend doing it often, but when you do, it can be quite disastrous to your opponent. It's very simple. You just run up with the foul action. You get a little cinematic, you step on his neck, and you make a check against his armor value. Unlike regular strikes, it goes straight to the armor value check. It's very nice. However, if you roll doubles, bad things happen. And we'll go into that in a second. Now, when going up against your opponent's armor value, you do have options. Much like when doing block actions, you may get an assist. An assist will give you a +1 to your roll, reducing your opponent's armor, essentially. So the character currently on the ground that we are moving up to has an armor value of 9 plus. Now, we have 4 characters surrounding that piece, dropping that 9 plus to a 5 plus. 5 minus 4 is 9 minus 4 is 5. Therefore, we need a 5 or better for this foul to work on 2d6. Now here is the danger of the fouling. I mean, apart from killing your opponent's pieces, which is lovely. If you notice, that dice roll there was a double, 2 5s. If you get a double on either the armor check or the injury check, the referee will see the foul and your piece will be ejected from the game. You may argue the call. Arguing the call is a d6 check. If you roll a 6, your piece stays in the game and you're good to go. If you roll a 1, the coach is ejected from the game and you may no longer argue calls. So right here, we're going to look at passing. Passing is very simple. It involves the passing stat. The human thrower has a passing stat of 2 plus. So he needs to get a 2 or better to throw the ball. The human catching the ball is an agility score of 3 plus, so he needed a 3 or better. However, he was marked by an opponent's piece. He needed a 4 or better. He got a 5. He was able to catch the ball. You may also do handoffs. A handoff, much like a pass, moves the ball from one player to another. However, in the situation with a handoff, only the receiving piece needs to make a roll, checking against his agility. This piece has an agility of 3 plus. He rolled a 4. He is able to catch the ball. You may do 1 pass and 1 handoff per turn. This is a dice-based game, and dice-based games are dangerous, so this game does offer you the chance to get re-rolls. In this situation, we rolled a both down and a skull. That is a very bad roll because this piece does not have block. If you remember what block did earlier, it mitigated the danger of a both down. So we're going to re-roll this. And we get 2 POWs. We pick the POW we like, we hit our opponent, and play continues. Be careful with the re-rolls though. They do add to your team value, which is something we'll get into in later videos. We're also going to look at the dodge skill real quick. It's another skill that will come up a lot, much like the block skill. So the dodge skill is an interesting one. If you notice, we're going to go back a little bit. So if you notice, when the human piece hits the goblin piece here, several dice options show up. One of those is the defender stumbles. It looks like a POW, but it has the exclamation point in it. This represents the 5 on the dice. Now this normally is a straight hit, much like a POW. However, if your opponent has the dodge skill, it mitigates it by turning it into an arrow, which allowed that goblin to bounce back instead of getting hurt. We're going to look at another, I consider it to be quite a dangerous maneuver, but it is an option for any player who wants to, a jump option. You may jump over any fallen piece. It is an agility check. So, you test against your agility, along with a +1 to your check for every opponent's piece, tagging you when you land. And, as you can see, we did not make the agility check. We hit the ground, an armor check was made, which we failed, and death occurred, as that can happen. Here we're going to look at what is known as crowd surfing, or pushing our opponents into the crowd. We got an arrow allowing us to push our opponent, and as they have nowhere to go but off the pitch, they are now in the crowd, and the crowd takes its own retribution. It's quite a violent game. When a crowd surf is made, a roll is made against your opponent's armor check. So it can be a very good way to damage or injure your opponent's pieces. So let's go back to the dodge skill, because we're going to discuss skill rerolls. Because you have team rerolls, which is what we used earlier, but here we have what's known as a skill reroll. So we're going to back up a second and go over that again. If you notice in a second, the dice are going to come up as this piece moves outside of these pieces' tackle zones. And the first die to come up is a 2. This character's agility is a 3 or better. That 2 is a failure. However, he has the dodge check, so you get to get a free automatic reroll, which came up as a 4. Therefore, it was a success. Then he picked up the ball, and he will then move towards the end zone for a score. That is how team rerolls work, and skill rerolls. Understand that only one reroll may be used per action, so if you use a skill reroll, you may not use a team reroll, and if you use a team reroll, you may not use a skill reroll. So those are the very basic rules of Blood Bowl. I recommend highly checking out the game. Also, we have our Blood Bowl 101 series. It is based on Blood Bowl 2 and a slightly older rule set. However, those videos will be redone shortly and will be added to the playlist. They're all still valid. A lot of those tactics are still around, and I recommend highly checking them out. In the meantime, I'm Ginger Jesus. This is OrcTech. You can find me on Twitch most weeknights at 4 to 5 p.m. playing Blood Bowl, because Blood Bowl is the greatest game ever made. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate you. Enjoy yourselves, and as always, be good to yourselves out there.